Okay, we're live.
Right. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. To members and officers of the council, members of the public, and welcome to the meeting of the Standards Committee. Prior to the meeting, all participants have checked that they can be heard and seen and can see and hear other members. And it's vital that you can be heard, and if it is preferred that cameras are kept on throughout the meeting. Just to double check this and introduce everybody present, kindly ask you to confirm your attendance. Councillor Braywood? Councillor Bayford?
Sorry, who is that?
Councillor Bayford? Yes.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Yes, here, Chair.
Councillor Crittenden?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dexter?
Here, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Duckworth? Councillor Fellows?
Yeah, evening, Chair.
Councillor Cupp?
Evening, Chair.
Councillor Scobie? Councillor Braywood? So I make that 3 absentees at the present time. Independent members, Patricia Causer? Patricia, can you hear me?
She's on mute, Chair.
Patricia, can you unmute your machine, please? Oh, we move on then. Councillor Peter Lorenzo?
I'm here.
Lee Wellbrook?
Yep, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
And I noticed Councillor Crittenden has just joined us. And then there's myself. Yeah,
Chair, could I just request that when you refer to myself, Councillor Crittenden or Councillor Crittenden, that you use the first names as well, because we do get a bit muddled up.
Yeah, certainly, Helen. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Chair,
If
Councillor Crowe-Brown as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crowe-Brown. Mr. Hughes, obviously, they would not worry about those attendees. If you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, then contact the Democratic Services Officer on call, who hopefully will be able to assist you. And today that is James, and their numbers added to the chat box for this meeting. I would ask that all participants mute your microphone when you are not speaking. This minimises background noise and will help everybody in listening to proceedings. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted permission to speak. To gain my permission to speak, please indicate on the chat to the right-hand side of your screen. I'll make a note of it and come back to you once the person speaking is finished. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, except for any items of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and the public from the meeting. This meeting is also being recorded and will be broadcast on the internet. Would everybody present please ensure your mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Do not turn your phone off, as it will make it harder for Democratic Services to contact you should they need to. And please refrain from checking your emails or conducting other business, and ensure you're in a quiet room that's free from distractions. Are there any apologies from absence? Have we not heard from Councillor Braywood, Councillor Duckworth or Councillor Scobie?
I haven't heard from them.
Okay. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of November be approved and signed as a correct record. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Councillor Helen Crittenden.
Thank you. Unless anyone objects, we take those minutes of the meeting as agreed. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No, good. The next item on the agenda is my report, which I'm sure you've all had a copy of and read before the meeting, so I can't see any point in me going over it. Has anybody got any questions they wish to raise in respect of that? No, that's good. Now we're going then to the agenda item 5, which I think Mr. Hughes wishes to speak on. Mr. Hughes, could I ask you to open the matter concerning this report?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Sorry, apologies. My internet is not particularly brilliant tonight, unfortunately. So if I do drop out, then somebody will just have to give me a shout and I can try and come back in again. So, yes, tonight we're looking at the report regarding the recommendations from the Constitutional Review Working Party. That's regarding changes to the way that members of the public ask questions at council meetings. So members will be aware that this report went to, or initiation of this report went to full council in December. But at that meeting, it was decided that members would like the Constitutional Review Working Party and Standards to look again at potentially including some form of appeals process to councillor questions asked by members of the public and councillors, and also to look at an appeals process. And sorry, bear with. My internet is dreadful. Sorry, bear with. Asking a supplementary question. Now, these two issues were both raised at the Constitutional Review Working Party some weeks ago, and their view was that they did not feel that there was any need for an instruction of an appeals process for rejected questions. But they did ask that the Standards Committee discuss further whether to allow members of the public to ask supplementary questions. They also, as an aside to that, also asked whether or not the Chief Executive, when she rejects a question, that she should consult with the Chairman of the Council first before doing so. And lastly, that information on the processes for submitting questions and support available from Democratic Services is shared both at full council and social media to help members of the public be better informed about how to ask questions. So those are the recommendations from the report. I'll quickly go through some of the findings that we've done in the preparation of this report, both for this committee and to the Constitutional Review Working Party. So with regards to supplementary questions, Democratic Services looked at all of the different councils in Kent. And of the 12 councils in Kent, inclusive of Thanet, five councils allow members of the public to ask supplementary questions, and 7 don't. And of those 5, it was unanimous that they have to, the supplementary question has to relate back to the original question asked, just like our members' questions do at the moment. And that the chair of the council has the ability to reject or disallow any questions that don't follow those rules. Also, it's also something that we felt that he also has the power to try and convince the member of the public to avoid simply having a reaction to the question that may or may not have been asked by the cabinet member, and to actually frame that supplementary question as a question rather than purely just as a comment. With regards to timescales, we think that it would probably be best to mirror the current supplementary question rules we have for councillors. And I think we just need to be mindful of that, the amount of time that we have to ask questions. So that's a 30-minute time limit. If we are going to add the ability for members to, or members of the public to have supplementary questions, obviously that's going to increase the amount of time each individual member of the public has overall in asking their question. And that could actually have the opposite effect of what people have in mind, which is obviously to increase transparency, because that will actually reduce the amount of time overall, and so the number of people that will get the opportunity to ask questions. That's just bearing that in mind, especially as we've increased or we are due to increase the word limit for questions from 50 to 150. So that is the supplementary questions element of it. With regards to the right of appeal, we looked at all the councils in Kent, and of the 12, no council in Kent has any form of appeals process against rejected questions. I think from Democratic Services point of view, certainly there would be a significant administrative burden for us to be able to do that. The way council questions are asked at the moment is that most questions are received on the day of the deadline. And obviously that then makes any appeals process have to happen in the very short amount of time between it's the 5 working days that we have between the closure of the questions deadline and the actual meeting itself. When would the deadline appeal be? Because again, obviously there's only 5 days, so that leaves a very short amount of time. And if you're going to have a period of time for allowing an appeal, then there'll be the time that it takes to determine that appeal. And then if that appeal is successful, then that leaves very, very little time for anybody to write a response to the question that's being asked. Again, another thing we need to say is actually, well, who would be considering that appeal? Questions are already considered and approved or rejected against the criteria by the Chief Executive. So again, there's that question. And also, what is the basis for an appeal? Again, questions that are over the word limit, for example, are very easily rejected because it's clear that it's very black and white issue of is it more than will be 150 words or not. Whereas it then becomes more nuanced with the should a question be considered vexatious or should it be too similar? That then becomes again a much more difficult question to answer, again in a very, very short amount of time. We did do some research as to the number of questions that we've received over the past year. So since January the 1st, we've received 34 questions from Republican councillors, 27 of which were accepted. So 7 were rejected. Of those 7, 3 were regarding ongoing planning applications, 3 were vexatious, and 1 was deemed to be substantially similar to one that we've already received in the last 6 months. So given the fact that actually that's not a large amount, so the rejected, the ones regarding planning applications and the ones regarding substantially similar generally are quite, I got this wrong before, objective. Objective in the sense that it is quite a black and white choice. Whereas the more subjective, being the vexatious one, that's only 3 out of the 34 questions that have been asked. So that doesn't really suggest that there's a substantial amount of questions being rejected that would then require us to have an appeals process. And also, the last thing I'd like to say is that actually Democratic Services are always welcome. We always welcome people getting in touch with us before the deadline to ask about the question itself. We will help members of the public to draft questions and build questions, and we can check questions for you. Part of the issue that we have is that for whatever reason, members of the public and councillors will leave questions or submitting of questions to the last minute. Now, I'm not going to go into why that happens, but obviously one of the implications of that happening is that if a question is rejected, we will always try and work with a member of the public to help them rewrite their question in a way that it can be asked. But that's not possible 10 minutes before the deadline finishes. If somebody had decided to submit a question a week in advance, then there's plenty of time for us to be able to work with that person and assist them in getting a question that is actually acceptable. So that's just something else to bear in mind. So the only thing I would like to add is that at the end of the discussion, and irrespective of what the panel agrees with the supplementary questions element of it and or the appeals process, the panel will have to still make a recommendation regarding the word limit being increased from 50 to 150. I'm not going to go into that today because that's already been through the process before, when it got to the council meeting in December, and no member at that point said there was any issue with that particular thing. But because it wasn't agreed at the council meeting, it will need to be subsequently agreed at the next council meeting. So it's still really important that we make a recommendation about that. So please don't forget that element of it. And that's all, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I think, members, we can take it stage by stage. Has anybody got any views on the right to appeal decision? Councillor Fellows?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there should be an appeals process. I think Nick laid it out fair and square there. That I mean, you're going to end up with the vexatious people just keep submitting awkward questions every month after month, you know, and then bogging down the democratic service officers. I think the appeals process is null and void. I think the ability for a chairman of the council to look at rejected questions, I think, is suitable enough. I think, in my opinion.
Okay, Councillor Helen Crittenden.
Yes, I wanted to ask one question regarding those that are rejected. Is the reason for the rejection given to the person that put in the question in the first place? Are they made aware that their question was considered vexatious, for example?
Perhaps I could ask Mr. Hughes to answer that.
Through you, Chairman, yes, it is. Yes, we'd always respond to them via email to say that, sorry, your question is too long, or it's been deemed vexatious because, or for example, it may be that they've mentioned an officer by name, for example. But we will always give the reason.
Councillor Bayford?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree that there shouldn't be an appeals process because I feel that members of the public wanting to ask questions know in advance of the criteria. And I think it would mean that fewer people were able to ask their questions simply because of the time limit. So I don't think it should be considered.
Okay, thank you. I don't think anybody else has got any comments by the looks of it. Mr. Hughes, can I ask, do we have to, sorry, Councillor Cupp?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly make a quick comment. Yeah, I agree. We don't need the appeals process in place. I think, as Mr. Hughes has said, if anything is submitted that isn't then taken forward, they can always get the help from the democratic services in how to construct a question that is actually helpful, not just to themselves, but also to the council as well. So I think that an appeals process is not necessary at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, can we break this down into 4 recommendations with proposers and seconders?
If you want to do that, Chair, that's absolutely fine, yeah.
I just think it would be a lot easier rather than trying to lump it all together, that was all. So I think the proposal is from the committee is that we do not recommend an appeals process for rejected questions. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Chair. Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. Right, if we can move on to the second item of that the Standards Committee allow members of the public to ask supplementary questions. Has anybody got any views on that?
I have a question.
Yes, Helen.
When we were having the introduction from Nick Hughes just now, it was talking about the time limit of 30 minutes. How many questions, if we allow supplementary questions, how many questions are we likely to lose off the end of those who had put in a question? For example, I suppose what I'm really asking is how often do we fill the 30 minutes and what kind of impact would that have on the number of questions that actually typically get asked to council?
Mr. Hughes?
It's quite a difficult one to answer. Sometimes we have lots. So we've had 10 plus questions at a couple of meetings, but equally then we'll have a meeting that only goes by with 2, for example, like the last council meeting, we only had 2 questions. But sometimes we have lots. I think we will see an impact. It is difficult to tell because I think that's quite, because obviously we're going to increase the word limit. That will allow for a couple of extra minutes per person. So they'll have like a 3-minute speech to do their question with, I would imagine. You'll then have the 2-minute answer from a member of the public, plus the minute to ask a supplementary question. So you're looking at probably an extra 3 or 4 minutes per person. Now that doesn't sound a lot, but and a lot, to be fair, does depend upon how quickly the chairman goes through it. Again, that's quite difficult in an online meeting. It happens a lot quicker because if you think about it, you can click straight from one person to another, whereas in the council chamber, they've got to actually walk from the public gallery up to the bench, ask the question, walk back down again, and so it's quite difficult to tell. I think it will have an impact. I would imagine that in a 30-minute session, you may look to lose one person or 2 people at push, depending upon if we were really busy. I mean, hopefully, most weeks it won't make a difference. But on the weeks when it's really busy, then I think, yes, we would probably have to cut down the number of people asking questions. The chairman obviously does have the provision to extend out beyond the 30 minutes, but that's quite unusual. I mean, the idea being is that there is a 30-minute limit for a reason, so it's quite unusual for him to go past that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Can I just make one observation on that, Mr. Hughes? And surely we would know before the meeting how many questions are going to be asked, so the questioner can be told that the one that they've got, because they're running out of time, would automatically be passed on to the next council meeting, so it wouldn't look as if it's been rejected.
I think we will always, the process that we normally follow, Chair, is that we will always put all the questions that we receive into the agenda. And if we can get through everybody, then brilliant, that's fantastic. Any questions that we don't get to when the 30-minute envelope effectively closes can either be answered in writing or, as you say, will be rolled over. They wouldn't be rejected per se, but they would be then become the first in line for the next meeting. But I think it's more the fact that if you get as far as getting in a question in the agenda, you would want it to be answered rather than it being rolled over to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I've only got one observation, as I raised at the Constitutional Review Working Party. Having been sitting in the council chamber and a member of the public goes up to ask the question is then answered, but the poor member of the public is sitting there not knowing what to do next. So I am in favour of supplementary questions. Has anybody else got any views on this? Councillor Helen Crittenden.
Thank you. I wanted to agree with a comment about the increase in the word limit, and that already allows for additional elements to the original question. And I noted in the report some of the comments about concern about using that second question or supplementary question to disagree or become vexatious. And those are the things that concern me. And I'm disinclined to agree with supplementary questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fellows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm against it, really. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not a cabinet member, so I'm not really in the firing line for public questions, but generally they're quite obscure, off-the-wall questions where a pre-prepared statement has to be issued by an officer as a response to the question. And a supplementary question is just going to try and catch someone out on a subject that they're probably not even going to know the answer to anyway. So I think that it's a no for me.
Okay, has anybody else got any observations?
I do, Chair. Councillor Cupp.
Yes, Councillor Cupp.
Very much in support with Councillor Guttigan and also Councillor Fellows as well. Just on the terms that I think that there's no need for a supplementary question when we are looking to extend the word limit on these questions, because that will surely allow the member of public to have more clarification within their question to a certain cabinet member. And then there is that fear that if we allow them to have that supplementary question, it allows them to have the opportunity to make a personal attack upon someone, whether that may be a member of the council or even an officer. And I don't think that we want that cause of possibly embarrassment to happen for the council and for ourselves as councillors.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bayford?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that allowing supplementary questions as well as the additional word limit could make questions uncontrollable, really.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dexter?
Yes, I must support my colleagues on this. I don't think supplementary questions are necessary, and of course a lot of supplementary questions turn out as statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead has joined the meeting. I understand she's entitled to ask a question under 20.1. Is that right, Mr. Hughes?
Yes, if the panel is happy to, Councillor Whitehead wishes to speak on 20.1. If the panel are happy to do so, then and she's entitled to ask a question.
Yeah, fine by me.
Yeah, absolutely fine. Councillor Whitehead, could you then ask, what is it, your comment?
Thank you very much for letting me speak. In relation to this issue, I understand the potential complications of the supplementary question. In terms of things being potentially vexatious, I would hope that the chair would be able to deal with anything that would come in that sense. But I do feel in terms of democratic participation, which is what the council is supposed to be for, supplementary questions could greatly increase people's understanding of what we do. And obviously I do get a great deal of questions as a cabinet member. I'm more than happy to answer any supplementary questions. And I think it shows that as a council, we do want to engage fully. We do want to be as open as possible. So I can understand the difficulties involved, both in terms of time extension, but council is our public face. It's where we get to show that we want to fully engage with the public. So for me, the point of supplementary questions is quite important, and within my portfolio, in that aspect, I would very much support it. Thank you.
Okay.
For speak.
Thank you for your comment. Do any of the independent members wish to make any comments? Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly make a comment on what Councillor Whitehead said. I would very much be in the mind of supporting her comments, but given that we weren't looking at an extra word limit for the questions, but as the extra word limit is coming into place, I feel as if that kind of covers the ground of a possibility of a supplementary question, allowing for that further clarity. And as has been raised before, if you are a member of the public, I feel as if you would go in with a certain question and then that is up for the cabinet members to answer. And I don't feel that there is then the need for that supplementary question to go on it, especially when you've got the extra word count of the question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Lorenzo, you wish to raise a question?
No, it's not a question. It's just a case of I'm agreeing with you as chairman that I will be in favour of the supplementary questions. It shows that the council will be very happy to actively listen and answer questions. The reputation the council has at the moment is not very good. Let's encourage attention.
Fine, thank you. I don't think anybody else wishes to make any comments. So can I make a proposal that the Standards Committee at this stage recommend to the council that they allow the public to ask supplementary questions First of all, is there a seconder to that proposal? No seconder, so the proposal's not.
I will second that.
Mr. Lorenzo seconds that. Then I think, Mr. Hughes, am I right in thinking we should take a vote?
Yes, Chairman.
Right, in that case, can we just go down the list? Councillor Bayford, for or against?
I'm against supplementary questions.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Crittenden.
Against.
Councillor Dexter.
Against.
Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, against, Chair.
Councillor Cupp.
Against.
Councillor John Quittenden. Oh, where's he gone? Councillor Quittenden. Councillor Crowe-Brown.
Against, Chair.
Patricia Causa. She's disappeared. Peter Lorenzo.
I'm for it.
Thank you. Lee Wellbrook.
Against, Chair.
I'm for it, but the motion is lost. So do we now need to put a second proposal, Mr. Hughes?
We can do, Chair, yep.
Again.
Yeah, I think the second proposal then from the Standards Committee is that we do not recommend to the council that they allow for supplementary questions from the public. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Fellows, thank you. Right. Councillor Bayford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Crittenden.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dexter.
For.
Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Cupp.
For.
Councillor John Quittenden. Councillor Crowe-Brown.
For.
Patricia Causa. She's disappeared, I think. Peter Lorenzo.
Against.
Lee Wellbrook.
For.
And I am against, but the second motion is carried, so that the recommendation to the full council from the Standards Committee is that we do not recommend that supplementary questions be allowed from members of the public. If we can move on to the third.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just check who proposed that?
I did.
And I seconded it, Katie.
Can I just check with Nick that that's all right that Mr. Tucker proposed both, even though they're contradictory?
That's fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Move on to item 3 of that recommendation, that when the Chief Executive rejects a question, they should first consult with the Chair of the Council. Does anybody wish to make any comment on that? Councillor Cupp?
Thank you, Chair. I think that I would support this proposal that if the Chief Executive wishes to refuse a question, they should be in consultation with the Chair of the Council, because I think just for that security that there are two minds looking over these questions to assess whether or not it's actually worth being read out to the full council and then to a cabinet member, personally to me makes sense. I think that often in these situations two minds are better than one, and that's no offence, of course, to our Chief Exec. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes?
Thanks, Chairman. I would just point out that obviously it's the point that we made at the Constitution Review Working Party that if we believe that we want to reject a question, i.e. that we feel as if it is within 6 months of a previous one, we will always put that point of view forward to the monitoring officer, and the monitoring officer then obviously advises the Chief Executive. She doesn't do that in isolation. There are a number of people that will help look at that and assess that question before it's then put to the chief executive. So just to put that in the case, and also I think we would. There was a discussion at the CRWP about whether or not we wanted to forward all questions. For example, like if, for example, somebody submitted a question and it was 151 words, then do you really need to send an email to the chairman of council saying this is 151 words, we need to reject it, when clearly it's just too big? Absolutely agree that maybe that you want to consider consulting the chairman of council on things about vexatiousness and substantially similar, but for the more basic things like word limit, I would suggest that we maybe don't do that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fellows?
I just wanted to say I agree with everything Councillor Cupp said, and I believe that we should definitely have a second opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Helen Crittenden?
Once again, I'd like to confirm I agree with what Councillor Cupp said. I'd also like to add that as we're recommending that we're not going to allow appeals, it would give another layer of confidence at the first submission of the question.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else wish to raise any comments? Councillor Bayford?
Yes, I agree, because I think it removes subjectivity, particularly in relation to vexatious questions. So I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. So I think then we can put a proposal, and I'll be looking for a seconder, that when the chief executive considers rejecting a question, they should also consult with the chairman of the council. Could I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Councillor Helen Crittenden.
Thank you. Can I take a vote on that? Councillor Bayford?
For.
Councillor Helen Crittenden?
For.
Councillor Dexter?
For.
Councillor Fellows?
For.
Councillor Cupp?
For.
Councillor John Crittenden? He's left. Well. Councillor Crowbarrow?
For.
Patricia Clausier? Peter Lorenzo?
For.
Lee Welbeck?
For.
So 4, so that's carried then, that we put that motion to the council. Helen, thank you for your comment there that we didn't take a vote on the first recommendation about the appeal. I just formed the opinion that the way the conversations went, everybody was in favour of not having an appeal, but we can put it there if we need to. Are you happy with that, Helen?
Yes, I am. I can see the response from Katie Brewer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so perhaps then we can move on to number 4, and this arose from what the comments we made during the Constitutional Review Party about democratic services assisting members of the public with the wording of questions, and it was recommended that this be mentioned at full council meetings and also on social media. Does anybody wish to make any comment? Councillor Helen Crittenden?
Just to support the recommendation, that's all.
Thank you. Any other comments, or can we put the recommendation to the vote? The recommendation, Councillor Bayford?
Yes, I agree. As long as there's some way of ensuring that a question isn't leading, the help given isn't leading.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So the recommendation from the Standards Committee is then that democratic services should ensure that publicity is given to the public, both at council meetings and through social media, that they are available to assist members of the public with the wording of questions to council members. Is there a seconder?
I second that, Chair.
Councillor Fellows seconded it. Do we need to take a vote? Or is everybody in agreement?
Yeah.
Everybody's in agreement. Fine, that's carried. Right, so then we can move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the
Chairman.
Standards. Sorry, Mr. Hughes.
Chairman, you forgot the bit I told you not to forget.
And
which is the bit about the word limit. We need to make a recommendation about the word limit.
Yeah, funny enough, I've actually written it down as well. In that case, one final recommendation that the committee recommend to the council that the number of words used by questions from members of the public is increased to 150. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I second that, Chair.
Councillor Fellows. Anybody against? No, so that's good. Is that happy now, Mr. Hughes?
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, and now we come to the complaint statistics, which I think you've all seen. Has anybody got any questions to raise? I shouldn't think so. The only one I've got, which is mentioned in my report, is when councillors write on social media, but that will be covered at the full council meeting. Is there any other business? No? In that case, the time is 6:15 and the meeting is closed, and thank you all for your attendance.